Step one for the Filecoin network is to amass a lot of hardware and build the world's largest decentralized storage network. We've basically done that, right? We built the blockchain, we built the network, we amassed the hardware, we solved that problem. Step two is to onboard a lot of data, a lot of really valuable, useful data in useful applications. The next step is bringing more really valuable use cases and applications. So go talk to businesses, universities, governments that need really cheap, valuable, useful data storage. Those groups usually have large amounts of data that they want stored verifiably, and Filecoin is a great use case for those. One of the next steps there is also the retrieval side, so building the retrieval market to enable a CDN level retrieval. So we want a CDN style content delivery network, sub-second page loads on all of the content on Filecoin. Like that's what we're going for. And there are many teams working on this right now. There's some teams ready to launch their alphas in Q4 this year, so that'll be pretty exciting. And we hope that in Q1 and Q2 next year we can scale that up to tens of thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of users, and get now proper CDN delivery everywhere. So if we can do that, we will have really cheap data storage, really fast delivery, and we can serve a lot of really valuable data to people. Potentially, at that point, we'll be ready for video. At that point, we can do video processing and video distribution. The step three in the plan is to bring computation to the Filecoin network. So that we can do that first by adding the FVM, so the Filecoin virtual machine, to bring smart contracts into the network. Then after that, we want to be able to do computational pipelines on top of the data. So think of being able to do all of the computational work that the Web2 cloud provides. And we want to bring all of that kind of utility to Filecoin. And we can do that by building layer 2 compute over data networks. And there'll be many built over the next year or two. They'll be based on different applications and different use cases. Once we do that, we are ready to actually cross the chasm and bring all of the Web2 applications into Web3. That's going to take 2 to 3 years for the entire blockchain space. So we want to be able to do, most of the blockchain space is working on hundreds of thousands or millions of transactions per second. We want to hit billions of transactions per second, or trillions of transactions per second. That's much, much harder. And we want to do it with a consensus protocol that we describe as hierarchical consensus. That's going to be shipping sometime next year or the year after. Now, one really important thing that the Filecoin community has been working on is to become the greenest storage network in the world. Not just the greenest decentralized storage network, but the greenest storage network completely. We want to achieve this by being able to measure all of the energy use of the network and being able to offset all of that energy use by using renewable energy credits. So being able to know that the energy that we consume in a particular grid is coming from renewable energy providers in that place. And we don't want to just get to carbon neutral. We want to get to massively carbon negative. We want to be able to have Filecoin in a region be pulling carbon out of the air, help decarbonize. The Retrieval Markets working group is a group with many different projects that are all building different kinds of retrieval markets. And for those of you unfamiliar with retrieval markets, these are CDNs. So content delivery networks enable you to deliver content really quickly to users. So retrieval markets are Filecoin's version of a CDN, and there are many of these, and all of them have already working prototypes that are pretty good. One of the ones that I'm helping out and getting involved with is Filecoin Saturn. Saturn is, I think, going to be launching its alpha sometime in Q4, and that's going to be a regional network that's going to map several different regions in the world, and it's going to be able to pin content to a specific region and be able to deliver it sub-second from that environment. And when Saturn doesn't have something, it's going to then look it up from other storage providers to be able to store it quickly. So think of it as being able to plan what content is going to arrive somewhere and then getting it delivered quickly. And we were sort of expecting retrieval markets to be kind of on the order of anywhere from hundreds of thousands to tens of millions of people could run these. Probably at the beginning it'll be 10 to 100,000 or something like that. And then over time that could potentially scale out. There's a lot of different kind of sub-problems in a CDN. So each of those is likely going to be a different type of retrieval market provider. So Saturn lays these out in terms of L0 in the user's computer, a cache right in the user's computer. L1, which is kind of a gateway close to the user. L2s, which are pinning content in a particular region. Or L3s, which are in with storage providers. And so potentially you can have many layers of caching here so that you can get the content as close to the users as makes sense. Think of the internet as a big grapevine with lots of different nodes and so on, all branching out. and you want to have content flowing from the super connected, dense area of the internet, which is data centers, like really massive amounts of storage, lots of bandwidth, and get all of that to kind of trickle out to users. And this can be like really slow and expensive because the bandwidth links are very, very low. But if you can kind of like pre-place all of the content out by the users, then you can serve it really quickly. I want to plug tooling for data DAOs. So data DAOs are DAOs or co-ops or communities that are oriented in terms of being able to gather and curate some particular data sets, being able to over time transform them and improve the quality of the data, or continue gathering an ongoing amount of data, and then be able to govern the use and licensing of that data, being able to decide how that data gets computed over, and so on. And what's rate limiting this is basically tooling for those communities to organize. So think of maybe adapting some of the DAO tooling that exists today, or potentially starting from scratch in some cases. But we need some kind of tools that enable these communities to come together, manage their membership, manage their priorities and their goals and the work they're going to do, and then be able to kind of decide how to apply licenses to their data and all that kind of stuff. So all of this is kind of like a rate limited by a single end user product tool. I want to go through all of the different stages of building a startup. First off, you should start by learning a lot about the world. Good news, you've already been doing that for many, many decades at this point. So that's, you're well on your way to success here. And what you want to be doing is learning a ton of concepts, both deep domains, like either deeply technical domains or design or product building, or even kind of the humanities, like different kinds of art or psychology and so on. All of those different areas can give you a lot of super valuable knowledge and skills to be able to think about a product or solving some problem that people have. The second stage is to experiment with a lot of ideas. So you want to be in a deep experimental space where you can try a lot of different concepts for potential products in a very low stakes way. You want to be able to kind of like free your mind from other constraints, focus on building a thing, try it out, see how it works, learn by doing, learn by building that. See whether it has legs, and if not, kind of move on to something else. After you experiment with a lot of ideas, eventually through a hackathon, you might find one idea that you get super excited about, and you might want to follow or pursue in some way. So now, of course, this won't happen. This is very unlikely to happen in your first hackathon. This usually is your third or fourth or fifth, potentially your 10th or 20th hackathon. So again, each one of these stages has like this loop piece, because you want to kind of stay in that stage and experiment a lot for a while before you kind of find like the really key valuable thing for to kind of move on to progress to the next stage. Great. So supposing that you've validated a thing, now you're okay. Great. Like you know that you have a product in your hands. You think it's going to be an interesting idea. You think it's going to be compelling. Now you want to go and like fully build it and launch it to the world as a product. And you want to kind of like start the startup, whatever that may be, whether that's a company or a crypto network or a DAO or a nonprofit or whatever it is that whatever your startup is going to be. You want to kind of like create some structure around the project to be able to start reasoning about, raising funding, paying contributors, signing contracts, and so on. So suppose that you kind of go through an accelerator program, you kind of build the structure of the startup, you start hiring people, you start being able to, you have a bank account or a wallet for your DAO, and you start getting adoption, and you kind of get the first legs of the product working, and you kind of have some early users and so on. Now what you need to do next is get traction, like get your product to have very strong traction with your market of users. This is what is going to be kind of like the gauntlet before kind of getting to kind of growth and scalability, is to get enough of the product right that you can start getting some strong growth signal from your user base, where suddenly you solve enough of the product problems and you solve enough of the key components that a set of users are starting to use it, and the product starts growing through either word of mouth or any marketing that you're doing and so on. But you're starting to retain users, meaning users want to use this thing and want to keep using it. They're not just kind of like checking it out and disappearing. now after you get traction, now you want to get into growing the business. So suppose that you have you've reached a certain level of scale, you've gotten your product to have good product market fit, you have like strong signals of growth. This is where now everything just gets harder. It doesn't actually get easier, it gets harder. Maybe it gets easier from a perspective of like, you now know you have a direction of where to go, but now this is where things get way more difficult in terms of like, the stakes are way higher, you suddenly start getting thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of users. Lots of people really care about your product. You're getting tons of feedback. You have to learn how to prioritize that feedback. This is where you start seeing kind of outages in your products, and like that starts really mattering. So this kind of, and here that's where you really need to deeply invest in forming a really great larger team. Usually companies or startups grow from small 5 to 10 person teams to 10 to 30 people, and that becomes kind of like seed rounds and seed investments. And this is usually where VC comes in. So VC does not come in the earlier stages. This is finally where like traditional venture capitalists come in. And this is this is very surprising to a lot of people that are new to building startups. Usually you think of venture capital as kind of being involved very early in kind of like the idea stage. And sometimes that happens, but for the most part, that's not how it works. Usually VC gets involved once there's a very strong idea, very strong product market fit. There's a very good shape to the problem, and then you sort of get started.